if you don't do that, then it just looks like you're an outsider doing trendy bike lanes and pop-up shops, and it's not actually affecting the people who live there or trickling down to benefit them.
Have you ever walked down a street and said, man, what could this street become? Well, that's exactly what our guest, Teal Thibaud of the Glass House Collective, did in Chattanooga. She walked down a street that was between downtown and kind of the next neighborhood and said, hey, this is a great place, but it's underutilized. It has some nice infrastructure, but what else could it be? And so they created the Glass House Collective, and we're going to talk to Teal Thibaud on episode 64 of the 1004 show about how exactly she took a neighborhood that she wasn't really welcomed in and has really been able to revitalize this as well. It's me, Zach Miller. I'm the host of the 1004 show. I'm excited and delighted to be here with you guys today and presenting this great story from Teal Thibaud. A couple of takeaways: how to spend an entire year listening to what your customer is looking for. It's a hard thing to think about, but she says it's been exactly what was necessary in that whole process, and then actually being able to implement that. And one thing that I think is really, really cool is they created a playbook for property owners to help them really get that neighborhood that might not be doing what they want into what they want to. So check out this episode, Teal Thibaud, Glass House Collective. You can learn about them at glasshousecollective.org. It's episode 64 of the 1004 show. I'm Zach Miller. Let's get into it. If you guys love this, give it a subscribe, a download, and share it with your friends. Appreciate the love. Here we go. Tell me a little bit about Glass House Collective. How'd you get started with it?
So Glass House Collective was founded back in 2012. Our mission at the time was to bring life back to Glass Street and Glass Street back to life. It's a 1920 commercial corridor in East Chattanooga, 2-lane traffic, kind of your typical Main Street style, but we just don't have many of that kind of infrastructure left here in Chattanooga. So the idea was that Chattanooga is growing as a mid-sized city. We recruited Volkswagen and Amazon to our city. And we did a city R&D workshop with Good magazine, and we looked at the two centers of growth of our city. And in the most immediate route between downtown and Enterprise South was Glass Street. And so we found it kind of nestled in a position of opportunity, just from an infrastructure standpoint and from a city planning standpoint. But then the quick lesson that we learned from kind of an entrepreneurial standpoint was that we thought, okay, well, now that we've figured this out, why don't we just come into the neighborhood and create this art project, fill all these storefronts with art, and everybody's going to notice that this corridor it could be something. And so we went into the neighborhood association and let them know that, and they asked us to take our white butts home.
So you have two kind of parts of Chattanooga. One is downtown, one is another growing part outside of downtown, and then in the middle of it is Glass Street. It's one of those mainstream America streets that is not being utilized the way that it could be.
Right.
I think almost every city in the country has that, is trying to revitalize that. What's so important about those mainstream America streets that have infrastructure in place, but they're not necessarily being utilized the way that they once were or could be today?
I think that it goes back to the walkability and livability of cities. That, downtown isn't for everyone. Not everyone can afford downtown. Not everyone can get to downtown. And so having these like mini city centers that are really based on the culture of that place is a game changer for those neighborhoods. And it provides access to amenities. It provides safety. It provides, just a neighborly feel if those places are alive again. And there's a reason why the infrastructure is there, because those places worked back in the day. And yeah, they're, regardless if that was white flight or post-industrial, whatever the reason of why they're vacant today, there's kind of hope that we can bring that back. But the hardest part about doing this is that we're really looking to do it without top-heavy investment, without the G word, gentrification. And sometimes gentrification isn't a bad thing. It just means increased investment, but what kind of investment and who is it for? those are the questions that we're asking ourselves when we're doing this work.
I think the story that you tell is really important, and to try and get away from gentrification, which happens in every city across the country, across the world. And I think the story that you tell with it is very important. I know you guys use Better Block as a way to help do that. I think my community, Southeastern Virginia of Norfolk, we've used 3 of them. I think one of them has done well. The other 2, I think, were good kind of first runs, but didn't really develop into it. When you guys did a program like Better Block, how was that? And then how did you make sure that the next steps continued? Because I think a lot of programs and platforms and cities that are trying to grow do this one thing really well once, but then to actually get that to continue going is the challenging part. And it sounds like you guys have been able to do that. How has the whole process been?
Well, I think from what I just said about, being really vulnerable and hearing from the community that, who are you to come in and tell us what we need for our neighborhood, take a step back. And we spent an entire year just listening. And I think that us listening and then finding a home on Glass Street, put a flag in the ground, created trust among neighbors. So then we were gaining trust. I think that recipe is key for any kind of Better Block or animation of a neighborhood event, because if you don't do that, then it just looks like you're an outsider doing trendy bike lanes and pop-up shops, and it's not actually affecting the people who live there or trickling down to benefit them. So I think, that's really important. When we put the flag in the ground and had our office space, we not only did it create trust, but we began to build relationships. And through the relationship building, we were having a really hard time plugging in. So the technical term of our work, by the way, is creative placemaking, and not everybody can get behind that term, and that's okay. But basically, we're utilizing arts and culture to spark this kind of renewal of this block. And so we were getting artists that were knocking at our door, and then we were getting residents that were knocking at our door, and we were like, how do we provide this, like, almost this discomfort level of, like, putting these 2 people and partnering these 2 folks together? Because a lot of our residents have never worked with artists, and a lot of artists haven't worked with neighbors that are looking to feed their 6 kids, like, are working to put dinner on their table for their 6 kids tonight. Like, this neighborhood is so under resourced that a lot of artists, they'll do a mural, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're embedded and working with the community. So we created this process, which is what we created, this how-to guide that we put together, where we pair an artist and a resident. We give them both a stipend to work on projects together. And they're temporary in nature, so the kind of lighter, quicker, cheaper idea of these projects. And then sometimes the process is more important than the product. And I think that that's hard for us to always remember, especially when we're writing grant reports and we want to, like, show shiny projects. But more importantly, we created a relationship, and we've empowered a resident and an artist. And really, when we did the Better Block was a platform to celebrate all of those projects. And that's the reason that our Better Block was successful, because we continued that recipe throughout, and we still do it. And Better Block was basically like a big block party to say, hey, thank you so much for participating in this work. You are creating change in this neighborhood, not the organization, you are. And we're so thankful for that, and let's have a big party. That's why I think it was successful.
And everyone loves a good party, right? So
that's right.
We're out of that. When you talk about the process being more important than the product or the project, when you are writing the grant associated with trying to get some of the stuff, or you're providing your grant updates, do they accept that? Are you seeing that they're seeing that is improving and actually that's becoming a product in itself, or is that a challenge that you're coming through?
It's definitely a challenge, and it's not just a challenge with grant foundations. It's a challenge with individuals. Individuals want to give to something that they feel like they're attached to a product. Like, if I'm going to give to this farm stand, I want the farm stand to look really good, and then I want to stamp my name on that. Or, like, the typical, like, if you're going to build a building, then you put your name on a brick. It's like, it feels so infrastructure heavy and less like process. And so we've had a really hard time communicating the importance of building relationships and building trust and saying, like, if these things don't happen, none of this work can happen. So can you please invest in us to like get the groundswell of enthusiasm from the beginning in the best way so that the good stuff that you all are used to can actually happen. But Art Place America is a funder of ours early on, and they understand this work, and they will fund kind of the risky relationship building because they understand that like the role of artists isn't just a mural, it's the process and the connection and the relationship and the empowerment that's behind it. So that's been helpful.
Do you think that some of the challenges with it are because they can't see the financial outcome of it, and
That's
so
right.
you're educating people in a different way? So it's easy for someone to give to the big arts or to schools. It's difficult to give to the starving artist where they can't see a real return on investment.
That's right. I think so.
So what do you do to educate them specifically to start investing in that? I know you guys you have that one big donor, but what are some of the ways that you've encouraged other people to think differently, to not just put their name on a brick?
So I think that was half of the reason why we created the how-to guide, was because it is a tangible, almost like a toolkit, and it's like a recipe for action, and it explains like an artist and a resident work together, then they need X for materials, and then this is how to do the project. And so, for example, this was like how to build a tree planter, how to create a community event, how to hang up banners, how to improve a storefront. So it's all these things that are like aesthetically pleasing, but it's the whole book is about how these two individuals work together, create a relationship to get the project done. When you put something like that in front of folks, then they start to understand the process a little bit better. I think there's a lot of folks that just think that, you blink an eye and a storefront gets done, or you blink an eye and a neighborhood's revitalized. And it's just a process of educating. So I think the how-to guide was an example of that. And I think what you mentioned about Better Block and celebration, I think that's also an example of it, because outsiders are coming to Glass Street on those celebratory events, and they're seeing black and white people working together. They're seeing new partnerships being made. They're seeing this momentum, and they feel like, either how can I be a part of this momentum, or what tools or resources can I bring to the table? And sometimes that's just basic financial tools, and we'll ask that of them.
Yeah, we forget sometimes that we know a lot more than others, and sometimes we just need to educate them. We're talking with Teal Thibaud of Glass House Collective. You can learn about them. Check them out at glasshousecollective.org. She's the co-founder and director there. It's episode 64 of the 1004 show. When you guys were starting this, what were the expectations that you provided other people? How long was it going to take to get this thing rolling, to actually see some sort of return, if a return, to get people to work together? What were the kind of initial expectations that you told people to expect?
That's a great question, and something that we challenge with all the time. Because managing expectations in our neighborhood is our number one challenge, and it's because it's such an under-resourced place that there is so much need, and we can only fill this much of that need. And so our organization, like you said, is called Glass House Collective, and that collective arm really rings true because we have about 37 memorandums of understanding with other partners and organizations to bring their tools and resources to the neighborhood, because there's only so much a staff of one full-time and 3 part-time people can do in such an under-resourced place. So I think when we first showed up and we were listening, we just said our expectation is just to hear from you, and we're not sure where we're going to go, and we thought that we had our big plan, and it's out the window now, and so we want to create this next plan with you. And what ended up happening was this really unsexy project of a streetscape plan for new sidewalks that were ADA accessible, pedestrian streetlights, a pocket park, and benches for the elderly, and bus shelters. I mean, basic amenities. And so that was our big focus for the first 2 years after we went on our listening tour. and we had to leverage other dollars. We brought new people to the table. We were involving artists and public art Chattanooga as much as we could. And so when that was done, it was like, okay, now our laundry list is checked off. And what we did for that was, like, before the city planted the trees, we put the tree planters out on the streets during Better Block, and we never moved them, and we never got in trouble. So it was that kind of like temporary work, right, that was leading to permanency. That's also why I think Better Block worked, because it wasn't just a one and done thing. It was like a ladder. We were investing in temporary to lead to permanency. But anyways,
And ask for forgiveness later, right? So if
right,
something, they don't see it, it'll be okay.
right.
Why Chattanooga? Are you from there? Did you grow up there? Like, what's so special about Chattanooga to you?
I've grown up here. I went to a middle school an elementary school where it was 50% people of color and 50% Caucasian. It was based it was called Chattanooga School for the Liberal Arts, and so it had an arts-based kind of mentality. And I left to go to college and was really wanting to get the heck out of here. And I had plans to go to Boulder and do big things. And I got looped into some of this work on Chattanooga's South Side on Main Street through an organization called Create Here that was focused on economy, arts, and culture. And I was working on the culture arm, and I left my salary, $35,000 paid job right out of school, right in 2009 during the recession, to get paid $10 an hour to work for this nonprofit that was only going to last, or was only set to, it was to set to sunset for over 5 years, and they were already 3 years in. So it was pretty risky, but it was where my heart was. And it was through that work that Good Magazine came down here, and we did that city R&D workshop based on how we started this conversation. And then when Create Here closed down, we said, okay, what's next? And we really felt like an equitable project was dear to our hearts, and and me, maybe coming from the background that I came from, just felt like I'm just kind of tired of just looking around me and only seeing people that look like me. And how can we bring our city together in a better way? And so that kind of accidentally happened when the neighborhood told us to go home after we told them what they needed. And so that's why. That's why.
I've heard a similar story before where you're passionate about something and you make a crazy risk to do it, and it's not very well paying, but it's very near and dear to your heart. How do you make sure that you can live the life that you want, even though you're giving up so many big things potentially?
At the time when I first started this work, I was young and naive and didn't have big bills, and kind of was still living the college lifestyle of beers for dinner and ramen for lunch. So it made that more doable. But as I was growing up and the organization was growing up, there was kind of had to be this balance of, okay, well, what would it take for me to be on salary? And if that means that I need to spend 40% of my time not on programs but on the fundraising, that's what I have to do. And so it became less fun, maybe best way to put it. And became, I was wearing more hats than I signed myself up for. But wearing the hats allowed me to continue the work that I did sign up for. So it was one of those things where I kind of cornered myself in this position. But it's worked out. I mean, I've been in community development in Chattanooga for about 9 to 10 years. And over the past 5 years, 3 to 4 years, I've drawn a salary and can, I'm fine, and it works out. I mean, of course, I could be making more money in corporate world, but that's not really where my heart or passion is, and I'd rather be happy than wealthy. So
Yeah, no one wants to put a TPS report on the cover of every paper. Did you say you're one full-time employee, that's you, and then 3 part-time?
that's right.
Okay. So what is a day in the life of Teal then?
Well, back to the wearing lots of hats. So this morning I worked with a really excellent creative writer that's a contractor on a new website for us. It's time to update our communications. And then before I met with you, I met with our community coordinator, and she was sharing challenges that she's dealing with the neighborhood and people showing up. And it's just real. It's real no matter how many doors you knock and how many flyers you give out. This isn't a priority for a lot of our residents. And so how do we change that? How do we change the mentality? And so we had that conversation. Now I'm on here with you. And then afterwards, I'm meeting with 3 potential investors on a building on Glass Street. So I'm like wearing a real estate investor hat that I'm very uncomfortable wearing. And then, if I don't feel like they're the right fit, or I feel like they're bringing the kind of investment that isn't needed in the neighborhood, I'm quick to tell them that I don't think it's a good fit.
I think it's important. I think a lot of people will take the money instead of making sure that the fit is good. Even in a community project like this with you, or even in a business, people take the wrong, they just take the check, and they don't understand to look for a red flag.
Yep. And then after that, I have a meeting about our new mobile farm stand. So we don't have a grocery store in the neighborhood. And so we received a grant for $2,000 to create this mobile farm stand that has fresh fruits and vegetables, but it also, like, the roof of the mobile farm stand creates these 4 different tables for other vendors to sell things on. And so it becomes, again, kind of more of like that better block feel of like, this is bigger than just you. Like, you just selling fruits and vegetables, it's not going to work. Our community is not educated enough, unfortunately, and that's just the way it's systemic. It is what it is. But I mean, can we sell ice cream and to see, different things and lemonade or hot chocolate at this point, and create this kind of cultural event where people will then want to stop, and then they'll be more likely to buy the fresh fruits and veggies. So we're talking about that now. And that's another example of a lighter, quicker, cheaper project that we hope turns into a permanent project. But we can't control a grocery store. We're not going to pretend and try that's, we're not in the business for economic development. We're in the business to spark, to change the perception, for folks to understand that this work is possible, to gain organization in our community, so that we have a voice, a unified voice, and that we can advocate for things like that, but not necessarily recruit a grocery store.
In that specific case, will you then pair an artist and a resident to work on that project?
We did.
Okay, cool. So I hear a lot of high-level conversations where you're moving the needle, but you're not implementing the work. How do you then take off that hat and then get to the nitty-gritty and actually make that stuff a reality?
So I think the best answer to that is that we're like a middleman between long-term community planning, and kind of zoning and revitalization principles that we're trying to figure out so that we're not up against gentrification. But that's bigger than us. We're also this middleman of this like real estate development, but we don't own any buildings on the street. I think that's really important to note, that we don't actually have control, and that we're empowering the right kind of people to come to the table. So we're the middleman in that. And then we're the middleman in just like working to change the perception, and working with artists and working with residents and organizing folks to do cool, good projects for the community, and let that benefit neighbors. Okay, so we're like this middleman. So every day we wake up and we say, what is it that we're going to do in 1 month, 1 year, and 3 years? Because we can't do it all. And some of this stuff is long term, some of this is midterm, and some of this is short term. I get the most excited about the short term.
Can't blame me there. It's fun.
You just get stuff done. And then the middle is also something of interest. But then the 3 years, I really try to bring my board on to help with that, and get partners on board to help with that. Because if you get stuck it's so easy to get stuck behind a computer days on days and plan and yada yada. At the end of the day, there's a sense of urgency in our community, and if we can't respond to that sense of urgency, then we're really not doing service to the community that we're working in my opinion.
No, I agree. You talked about zoning and city planning, economic development, real estate. What's the relationship with you guys there? And at the same point, do you find that because you don't own any of the buildings, it's difficult for you to get some of this stuff off the ground? I know in our community we have an arts district. We have several arts districts. So there's, I think, 17 different cities kind of in southeastern Virginia that are all under one region, and many of them either have or are establishing arts district. And the main one, or the first one, they got some really good um, first kind of traction out of it. And one of the biggest challenges that they're having now is getting the landlords and the people who actually own the buildings to make it so that it's not um, they're making it very difficult for people to then move in and do a very similar
Right.
type of business. And so how do you have those conversations with them knowing that it might not be to that full potential?
Yeah, it's been a big challenge. I'll say first that we had no idea that the perception would change as quickly as it has, and that people would be interested in coming to Glass Street as fast as it has. So we weren't prepared, and now we're trying to be proactive. And if we don't get on this now, we're going to be reactive and it's going to be a mess. So we're also, there's a sense of urgency on this end that there's a lot of discomfort in, because we showed up in the neighborhood and said, hey, we're not here to make money. We're not here to buy buildings. This is what we're here to do. And now because we've seen this new investment and this new spark and what can happen, and these folks are working on Glass Street. Is Glass Street going to be a new Main Street? And now like the hype is up, that we were really concerned. And what we've been doing, which has worked if the hype wasn't there, which is we go and we partner with the property owner, we renovate the storefront, we activate this storefront, and then we find a long-term tenant and we move. That way we are partnering with the property owner, we're creating a relationship, we're letting them know that having their building sit vacant isn't acceptable. We're also letting them know that there is a market in this neighborhood that they otherwise I don't think that they felt maybe was there. And we're saying, this is the rent that we've been paying. This is the rent we're willing to pay you. You need to put in money on our end. So the first building we went into, we renovated the storefront for about $10,000, and then they gave us $10,000 credit to rent. The next building we moved into, because we were doing that one building, somebody else bought that building and renovated it, and then we moved into that space because we had kind of proven that the work was possible. Now we're working with another property owner that was planning on just sitting on that property. We're asking her to put in $15,000. We're matching that. A lot of that's going to storefront improvements and aesthetics. But just that process and that contract took a year to put together, and we're still not in our space. And so, yes, I think it's a challenge. I mean, if you have control, you can do whatever the hell you want, and we don't. And so we're trying to work through this lens. And now I'm not quite sure, and I question if it's the right approach. And we're going through strategic planning, and we're getting some pressure from funders and partners that maybe now is the time to gain some control, so that, like you said, this doesn't become a district that, the whole idea is that it is affordable, it is for everyone, and if we don't have control, who are we to push that? Investors want to make money, duh. And so, of course, ideally we would find a hero developer or a socially minded investor, but those are more and more rare these days. And so,
Especially when the value of the district or whatever the street could be becomes more valuable because
that's right.
you make it more valuable, and then
Right.
it's someone's mind to just think, oh, let's make more money on this because
Right.
that's what they've been taught their entire life. And so I think it's kind of setting that expectation and saying, hey, let's do this thing for a while. And I like the whole playbook that you put together for property owners, and I hope that continues to go well for you, because I think that's something that a lot of communities across the country could probably implement, because I think they go through a very, very similar struggle with that. Is there actually a glass house for the Glass House Collective?
No.
So how did you come up with that name then?
Well, Glass Street was the glass. The house was the kind of like warm, inviting, relationship building, like wanting to feel like the flag in the ground of like a lot of things happen in a home, a lot of things happen in a house, and we were so focused on the commercial corridor at the beginning of our work that it didn't really resonate a lot with our residents just because there wasn't really much going on there. Like they cared more about their home and their front yard, which makes sense. So kind of thinking about that, and then the collective always knowing that we couldn't do all the work on our own. So that was the idea behind the name.
Very powerful. What's something about Glasshouse Collective that people don't know about that you want them to know
Um, I think that there's a few things. I think one is that locally, I don't think that folks understand the the true power of investment that we're putting into people. It's hard to track, it's hard to measure, but so much of our time gets put into relationships that I think people wonder, well, what the heck are they doing? Why? Oh, they have a block party, or yeah, I'll go down there. But we try to share personal stories. We try to get folks kind of similar to you to showcase their story, and it takes time, and it's work. So I think that's one, the kind of investment in people. I think two, where I don't know what's going on where you are, but in Chattanooga, conversations about race, reconciliation, and equity are kind of top of mind right now. And um, I get frustrated in those meetings because I feel like folks just talk about it and they're not actually taking action. And so I think a lot of people don't realize that we are a not for profit that is taking action on equity, and creating a more equitable place for all of Chattanooga that will then add to the vibrancy of our city as a whole. And then third, I don't think that folks understand or know that we're doing this work without control. I think a lot of people assume we've got this figured out, and we don't. Um,
that's got to be a good
so,
feeling though, that people think that you're doing such a good job that you do know what you're doing. You do know what you're doing. It's just
well, yeah, I was asked to speak on a panel, and it was called "Fake It Till You Make It." I was like, "This is so perfect."
I think there's more people in the world that fake it till you make it than not. So, what's next for you guys? What's that 3 year in the one month, 3 month, 3 year? What's the 3 year for you guys?
So we're about to enter into our last year of our 3-year planning process, and so we focused over these past 2 years and then the next on business development. So making sure that we are working with that property owner to go into a new space, like I mentioned, um, doing temporary projects in other spaces to show the viability of those spots, and then recruiting a creative enterprise to Glass Street. And so the way that we're planning on doing that is we've worked with a property owner, and we're getting a community jury together, and the people within the community is going to choose what business we're recruiting, which will be interesting. And that will be happening early spring. Um, and then under public space and streetscape, we're doing, we're really driving some infrastructure change to this intersection and bookending Glass Street by these two intersections with the ADA sidewalks, the street lights, everything that I talked to you about earlier. That's really important to our residents. And it sets the stage for outside investment. So doing a streetscape plan at that other intersection. And then we have a national park at the top of Glass Street most people don't even know about. And so we're working to connect the national park with the corridor, and we created a long-term plan for that, and we're just chiseling on that, every little bit we can. And then last but not least, we partnered with Habitat for Humanity's neighborhood revitalization program. And so yes, they're building new houses in the neighborhood, but more importantly, they're fixing up elderly homeowners' homes, where they are, and they're meeting them at their home, instead of always asking them to come to us or asking them to deal with the commercial corridor. So that's been a really fruitful partnership, and they'll continue to do that work.
Very cool. A lot of exciting stuff going on in Chattanooga. This is Teal, Thibaud, the Glasshouse Collective. You can learn about them at glasshousecollective.org. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. I enjoyed it too.
Hey guys, it's Zach Miller again. I just want to say thank you so much for watching today's episode with Teal. it's really inspiring to hear someone talk about trying to make big change like that in Chattanooga, and so really excited about that. I have a favor to ask of you, though. If you really like this episode, I'd love it if you could go in and give us a 5-star review. So all you have to do is go in and give it 5 stars, and then tell me a little bit about why you love this episode. If there's someone that you would love for me to interview, I'm happy to try and get them on the show. So hit me up at zach@startwithhatch.com, and I will do my best to get that person on the show. If you have a personal relationship with them, let them know. Have them reach out, and would love to interview them as well. But appreciate you watching, and appreciate that 5-star review. We'll talk soon. Cheers.